Hey guys, Landon here. Let's talk about role-playing games. You ever just been in an encounter that's just kind of dragging on, kind of boring, and really just, I don't know, lacking interest? You just like roll dice. Yeah, okay, roll damage. You hit the goblin. Like, it can get boring. So I put together a list of 10 ways to make encounters more memorable. First, I'll start with some general advice. Take time during your prep to think about some outcomes. Think about things that can happen based off of like common player actions. Stuff that players will do. If you know, like the wizard's got a spell they like to favor, think of different ways that might affect the opponent. Think about if the barbarian's got a great axe, how can they hack stuff up with that great axe? Just having a few ideas going into it can definitely do wonders. It keeps you from having those like stammering moments of having to think up outcomes when you're narrating stuff. Past that, I would also say have some goals in mind when you're playing. Obviously, talk it out with your table first, but think, do you want to kind of create moments that are really badass for the party? Or are you trying to recreate Dark Souls? Like what vibe are you going for? And all right, so first off, dynamic entry. This one's a pretty obvious one. You got ambushing or being ambushed. You don't always have to be like strict with perception rolls about it. Obviously, don't screw over your players, but think about how you might be able to catch them off guard with something, or even if you want them to have an ambushing moment, lead them up to that. Give them some hints towards it, or maybe like, give them an environment that might benefit them in that way. There are a lot of ways you can kind of approach it to kind of create a different power dynamic going into the encounter. All right, next would be environment. Make the battlefield interesting. Think sensory. Think about just like the smell that might be present when they enter the ogre's lair, or the kind of tiling throughout the dungeon. These are things that you'd even kind of want to have in mind outside of combat, but think about how they might tie into that as well. Just kind of create a unique space for the encounters to happen. Maybe where is the cover at? Where would be is there elevation? Or even just like considering doors. Like having people barricade themselves in. Anything that you can do to kind of keep things interesting and change it up. Next up, I would say consider hazards. This would be just traps or natural hazards like lava, quicksand, but even spike pits and spear traps, whatever it might be. I can think of a great example when had my party. They were finding some cultists who were conducting this ritual. They were ready to sacrifice this girl on this altar, and they bust into the room, luckily in time for everything, but the party fighter is just like gung-ho. He's ready to just charge straight in. Well, there's a spike pit surrounding this central platform that they were on. He runs straight across the bridge and falls right into the spike pit. And, he didn't even see that coming, surprisingly. But it ended up the rest of the encounter took place in the spike pit. The head cultist was down there fighting. The druid had to save his life. Turned into a tree. It was pretty awesome. Next would be elites. This would be just taking a stat block and adding some stats, just buffing it a little bit. Obviously, keep the power level of your game in mind and the party as well. And even an important aspect to think about is how they're doing in the current game. Like, are they really badly wounded? Are they like spent on spell slots? Like, be mindful of that. But you can always take just like maybe like you have like a kobold chieftain who's there, and you just give him like a glaive and some nice armor, make him kind of stand out a bit. That way, that kind of indicates to the party, like, okay, this guy seems to be more significant than the other kobolds. Don't just pick one at random and just like slap 50 extra health on him or whatever. You want to have an intention in mind for that. Let's see. Next up would be reskinning, and reskinning is a pretty useful technique because you can take just ordinary monsters and make them seem like something way more awesome. A great example is I had a cave entering into one of my dungeons, and there was a large kind of central chamber there where the there was a creature who had kind of clawed its face up. It was like blinded, pale white, hulking mass of muscle, and the party was terrified of it. They avoided it. They were all stealthily trying to like creep along the edges of the cave there, when in reality it was just an ogre. I just took the stat block and literally just gave it an interesting appearance and kind of made it something more than it is. This is also great for like bosses and whatnot too. Like think how you can make it your own. Next would be custom creatures. This isn't something that I dabble with too much, but it's definitely a good option. If maybe something that you're working with doesn't quite fit your needs, find ways that you can customize it, or build something completely new altogether. Alright, next up is pacing, and this one's very important. I think this is probably one of the most important ones on the list. You don't want the encounter to drag on or really just like start to lose its luster or feel boring. You definitely want to find a way to keep things interesting, and I approach this by thinking cinematically. So if you think about it like an action scene, you don't worry so much if the goblin has 2 HP left and everyone is still alive. Like, don't spend the next turn killing the goblin. Just let him die. Like, when whoever hits him on the last move there, just let him drop. It's really not going to make that big of a difference. It's not like anyone's holding you to that, so just do what feels right for the situation. Make your players feel cool. I can think of a situation where I had like a horde of kobolds all running up on this bridge that they were trying to cross, and there was like 20-something kobolds, and they were just like slicing their way through them. It was a really cool moment where the party was just like fighting these overwhelming odds, but they just completely wrecked them. Know that you're telling a story first and rolling dice second. Next up is non-hostile solutions. This would just be like social options, or even just like clever ways around different situations. It's not going to apply everywhere, but it definitely is helpful to think about that. Good example that I have is party ran into some bandits in their hideout, and they managed to hole themselves up in this room, and it turned from just being like a bloodbath encounter where they kick in the door and kill everyone into more of this like negotiation, and it ended up leading to the bandit leader directing them out towards this cache of treasure that they had in the forest, and party then ended up later getting ambushed trying to do that. And like you can even have like a whole situation, and it can get a little strenuous if it gets too far off the beaten path, but some like parties will like to take captives and bring people along. Oh man, I can think of the time where I had a party just drag along. They tied up an ogre and threw it into a Knoll encampment where it proceeded to get very pissed and destroy everything. That was pretty cool. Stuff like that, just creative ideas. Just always be willing to let people try. Next up is existing conflict and wandering monsters. So you can think about having different opposed groups in your setting. So an example I have from recently is a group of Zolgath or troglodytes were facing off against 2 hellhounds, and they were already fighting it out, like going back and forth in their battle before the party even shows up. So the party gets there and they're like, oh well, what's going on? It gives them an immediate point of interest to kind of like decide how they're going to approach the situation. Maybe they pick a side, maybe they kill everything, or maybe they just let them fight and completely avoid them. It kind of opens up some new possibilities that way. Then as far as wandering monsters go, this one you want to be careful with. I definitely think back to pacing in that regard, because you don't want to just like, pull the, oh ho, I pulled one on you players, and like just throw more monsters at them mindlessly. Like, you don't want to do it for no reason. You want a chance to kind of like surprise them and catch them off guard, but like do it when it feels right. Don't just do it to drag your encounters out. Lastly would be items. And this would be not just magic items, but even mundane items, like just changing up gear, or maybe giving a creature different armor. It's really simple stuff like that can go a long way. But even in terms of magic item, like maybe give the bandit leader a potion of invisibility. Like little things like that do a lot to just change the entire dynamic of the encounter. And if you give someone something, obviously, like, have them use it. You know, like, you don't want to necessarily deprive the party of any loot potentials. Like, still reward the players, but also think about how people might carry a healing potion with them and, you know, pop it if they take like a big hit in the beginning. You want to be careful with it because you want to make sure you maintain game balance and do what's appropriate for your party's power level. But it's definitely something fun to think about because it can really kind of bring some interest into the game and really just kind of change it up from just having the same generic stat block for every enemy. All right, well, that's all I've got, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I definitely would like to hear, what did I miss? What have people done, or what have you done to make encounters more memorable? Definitely let me know in the comments below. If you liked this, please let me know. Feel free to subscribe. I'm going to try to put out videos more often here. I'm still figuring it all out, but I'm having fun doing it, so we'll see how it goes. Until next time, guys. Peace.